Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Supply Chain Solutions Weekly Ship Show series. Today is November 3rd, 2022, and this is episode number 43 in our Ship Show series for 2022 that keeps you informed of the changing market conditions, emerging trends, and best practices in a volatile time of geopolitical intrigue and supply chain disruption and inflation. Boy, is that a lot. As always, it's my pleasure to welcome my Ship Show co-host, Jason Brand, our Director of Business Development, who joins Vanessa and I each week on our broadcast. And finally, my name's Anthony D'Ambrosio. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Supply Chain Solutions, a company that always delivers value quickly, affordably, and flawlessly. And lastly, we'd like to thank our amazing Director of Marketing, Vanessa Fry, for producing today's show. So, we have a great show this week, folks, with very critical subject matter that's really important for everyone to understand. So Jason and I are going to be unpacking how will the diesel shortages and the looming rail strike affect your supply chains. It's really a perfect storm for supply chain disaster, unfortunately. So I'm going to start off and just do a little bit about diesel. Let's talk about the diesel. And what Jason and I are about to share with you is a developing situation, and we hope to share more once the facts become more clearer. But it appears that a very serious diesel crisis is about to take us by storm, and that's going to have a dramatic impact on our economy and our supply chains. And we are being warned that there will be severe shortages of diesel fuel, diesel exhaust fluid, and diesel engine oil in the coming months. Most diesel vehicles require all three in order to run. And so this is a really serious shortage, and any one of them, a shortage of any one of them would be a major disaster. And needless to say, simultaneous shortages of all three could potentially be catastrophic. And I think what a lot of people don't, realize sometimes is most Americans don't spend much time thinking about diesel, but without it, our supply chains collapse and we don't have a functioning economy. And it's been said many times over the years that the US economy runs on diesel. And though most of the consumers shake their heads at the cost of gasoline and complain about the cost of filling up their car tanks each week, each day, what they really should be worried about is the price of diesel. And the US economy runs on diesel. It's what powers the container ships that brings goods from Asia and other areas of the world to the United States. It's what powers the trucks that collect the goods from the port and brings them to the warehouses and then to your home. And it's also important to know that farmers who grow food, the food that you eat, put diesel in their tractors to plow the fields. And the workers that bring construction equipment to build your home put diesel in their trucks. So diesel is so amazingly important, but yet there's never a big focus on it. Since January, supplies of diesel fuel have been steadily getting tighter. And as supplies have gotten tighter, prices have skyrocketed. The average price of a gallon of diesel fuel hit $5.96 a gallon just this month, and it has remained above that level ever since. Now, we'll vary in a few places, maybe $5.30, maybe $5.50, but up here in the Northeast quadrant of the US, we're seeing it at $5.96 a gallon. Now, one of the biggest reasons for the supply crunch is the serious lack of refining capacity, and also that the US is not drilling for oil anymore. And if you think about it, just 22 months ago, before the new administration took over, the US was the #1 oil exporter in the world. And also, back in the 1980s, the US had twice as many refineries as it does now. And a lot of refineries have been shut down. But I think the fact that there are fewer refineries which process crude oil into diesel and other products in the US than there were just a few years ago is becoming a real big, problem. When you think about it, there are just 124 refineries now operating in the United States, down from twice as many in 1980 and down from 139 refineries in 2016, according to the U.S. Energy Information Association. Now, the Northeast region is particularly sparse, with just 7 refineries today, down from 27 in 1982. And I could tell you where I live at, which is very close to Philadelphia and southern New Jersey, we had a major diesel refinery here right outside of Philadelphia that caught on fire last year, and it's never been put back in operation. So it's a real big problem. Now, there have already been some temporary outages of diesel fuel at a few locations around the country, and we're being warned that the disruptions are likely to start escalating very quickly. But the good news is that we aren't going to run out of diesel fuel in the short term. It may be a lot more expensive, and there may be more painful shortages as the ebb and flow of the supply starts to fluctuate, but we don't anticipate that we're going to completely run out of it. At least we hope not. Unfortunately, the crisis that we are facing with diesel fuel is really the diesel exhaust fluid shortage, which is potentially much more serious. And the U.S. could soon experience severe shortages in diesel exhaust fluid, which they call DEF, and it impacts U.S. drivers already hit with soaring, fuel prices. It's really going to impact those drivers. Now, DEF is a solution made up of urea and deionized water that is needed for almost everything that runs on diesel. It reduces harmful gases being released in the atmosphere and works by converting nitrogen oxide produced by diesel engines into nitrogen and steam. If you have a diesel vehicle that was sold in the United States after 2010, your vehicle could technically run without DEF, but in most cases, your vehicle simply will not let you start it if the DEF tank is dry. So it's a real conundrum there. Now, can we call it DEF jam? A little levity? I don't know, but everything is in short supply as supply chains continue to unlink because of the problems with diesel. Now, the latest commodity reportedly hit is DEF, or the blue diesel exhaust fluid that every diesel sold in the US after 2010 needs to cut its emissions. And this means that every diesel truck, diesel RV, SUV, and car owner will likely have to look harder and pay more for DEF. And a diesel engine can technically run without it, but again, as I said just a few moments ago, it's likely not to start without it. And I think one of the biggest reasons is the lack of urea. And there's a real big shortage for this. Now, the United States is one of the largest importers of urea in the world, and Russia and China are two of the largest exporters. And in previous years, that wasn't a problem, but now with the war in Ukraine, it's dramatically changed things. And I think a major portion of our urea right now comes from Europe. And because of the war in Ukraine, we're seeing a shortage of it. So Russia is just one of the world's major, Russia is one of the world's major exporters of it, and China is too. And, recently they have suspended exports of urea. So it has really caused a lot of supply chain disruptions. And since it's also a major component in fertilizers, there's intense competition for urea. Just to give you an example, Supply Chain Solutions handles a huge business for a huge fertilizing company that imports animal feed and fertilizer. And one of the things they always talk about is the shortage of urea. So without DEF, without that diesel exhaust fluid, our economy is going to be in for a world of hurt. Meanwhile, retailers, customers, and distributors are all reporting shortages in diesel engine oil. And this isn't an imaginary problem. It's a real problem that has so far been entirely ignored by corporate media. And I don't think a lot of people are hearing about this. And apparently, there are some diesel engine oil additives that are extremely short supply right now. And one industry insider is telling us that the problem isn't going to be resolved anytime soon. So what this means is that people are going to start running out of diesel engine oil. In fact, it's already being reported that trains in Sri Lanka will soon have to completely shut down because of a lack of diesel engine oil. And Sri Lanka Railways said that it would not be possible to operate trains in the future due to the lack of engine oil. And a senior official at the Sri Lankan Railways said that the current level of engine oil would only last for another 2 months. And we're in that same sort of situation here in the United States. Our trains and our railways need the diesel engine oil, okay? And that's in line with the warning we're hearing in the States right now about that there's about 8 weeks of diesel engine oil remaining in the pipeline. So, as I noted in the opening of the show, the diesel vehicle requires diesel fuel, diesel exhaust fluid, and diesel engine oil in order to operate. And if trucks, trains, and ships don't have it, we're going to have a supply chain meltdown. And you need all three. And so, since I was just talking about the railways, it's a great segue to hand this over to Jason, who is going to talk about the potential rail strike, and that's a real big problem that could happen. So Jay, why don't you unpack that for us?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's more ripples we're dealing with, right? And we've had, we talked about this on so many episodes with the COVID lockdowns and the ripples that happened there. We've got the Ukraine-Russia situation, which we're still not really fully understanding the effects on us yet. And, here's another thing that's coming up. But Anthony, awesome overview. I know a lot more about diesel because of what you said. And I know everybody else does too. So good structural knowledge that we can build off of. I want to piggyback off what Anthony was saying. And I want to want to make sure we get all this in there and that you guys have, we don't give you too much information so you can actually digest it. But I want to mention maybe a little silver lining, a little fun fact. So many people think that trains and locomotives, that they run off of diesel fuel, but actually that's not entirely accurate. So trains or locomotives, they're generally called diesels, but locomotives are actually electrically driven. There's a diesel engine that's essentially driving a generator or an alternator, basically, that produces the electricity to run something called a traction motor, which are electric mounted to the locomotive's axles, which physically move the train. So this is actually decent news. So while you still do need diesel to move your conventional train, the silver lining here is that since diesel is not actually the propulsion engine, you can retrofit locomotives to use alternative fuel sources. So companies like Caterpillar actually have already produced natural gas powered locomotive systems. They're marketing them to rail companies, and solutions like this could make great stopgaps. If there is these diesel issues do persist and we don't have a clear way out in the future. So a little bit of a positivity, but enough with that. Back to the ship show or the supply chain market we are still in the trenches of right now. Okay, so there's a lot here with these rail strikes, and I'm going to try to give you as much information as possible, try to kind of hang on because we're going to go through a lot. So firstly, Anthony mentioned it. We've got multiple different unions. We've got 12 unions in particular. They represent the rail yard workers, and all 12 vote separately to ratify the talks. So contrary to a lot of the doom and gloom concerns that you're hearing, 8 of the unions have already voted and they've counted their votes. The remaining 4 will have the results of their voting determined by the latest November 21st. Now, of the 8 unions that already have voted, 6 of those actually did ratify the talks and didn't have major enough problems, or at least the numbers, to go against what the negotiations were agreeing on. So the 2 distant groups that failed to pass or ratify this vote, they were the BRS, and that is the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen, and the BMWEB. Now, I'm going to have to read this one, so get ready because it's a pretty long acronym. So the BMWEB stands for the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Yeah. I'm like, wait, that doesn't even sound right, but it's correct.
Right.
So, yeah. And actually, it is this final group, the BMWED, that is causing most of the ripples in the news right now. So before diving into some of the details of the complaints, let's take a step back. Let's talk about some of the facts about the unions in general. So the combination of the railroad unions altogether, all 12 of those groups, it's considered one of the largest bargaining units in the country. In total, they represent more than 115,000 members. Now, Anthony and I have talked a lot about strikes lately, and this is obviously because we're working through the ILW labor talks at the moment on the West Coast, but also in Europe, we've had a series of strikes happening throughout multiple different industries over the past couple months. So it's a little hard to make the significance of another strike really stand out, if that makes sense. But if there is one that should really stand out from the rest, it is this current strike. It is the rail workers. And, you know, the US, the main reason behind this is the US has just a really long and complicated history when it comes to rail workers and rail strikes. So let's go all the way back, 19th century. All of the great strikes that happened in the US actually were railroad strikes. And they're were sort of revolutionist at the time. So railroad strikes actually were the reason why Pittsburgh got burned down. And it was part of the Great Strike of 1877. It also shut down Chicago. And, you know, if you like things like the 8-hour work week, thank railroad strikes for that. Or excuse me, 8-hour work day. Thank railroad strikes for that. Now, railroad strikes also have the potential to be incredibly detrimental to our economy. So during the last strike that actually occurred in 1992, railroad workers from the International Association of Machinists actually just walked off the job, and Congress got involved within 3 days and essentially banned the strikes, banned the lockouts because they just were so detrimental to the US economy. So understanding that, you know, obviously our last strike was in 1992. We've had massive strikes in our history. There is a lot of serious history here, and there has been serious implications. So to kind of walk you through what's going on right now, let's first talk about like what's on the table to be ratified and where the pain points lie. So the current deal that is being voted on right now includes actually the biggest pay raise that the workers have seen in literally decades. Wages are going to be climbing by 24% by 2024, and that also includes an immediate 14% raise. They'll get $1,000 bonus, $1,000 annual bonuses over 5 years, and will not have to absorb any higher healthcare deductibles or copays during that period between now and 2024. Because of this agreement, the average rail worker's pay is going to increase to an average of $110,000 a year by 2024. So, what's the main pain points? So remember, this agreement was ratified by 6 of the 8 unions that have finished voting so far. But the meat of the current discussions, and that what has gotten really heated, surrounds sick leave, specifically paid sick leave. So you've probably heard this word tossed around a lot up to this point, but if you want to dive into the details of the policy in question, it has to do with a point-based attendance policy system. So this system's actually already been adopted by other carriers up to this point during this year, actually. But the main concern that the unions view in this policy is it's penalizing to the workers in their view. So, and it also can actually cause termination due to the point system. Now, things, and their major complaint is routine doctor's visits, if there's a family emergency, or even if there's a serious health complication you have, it could put you to a point place where you would be terminated. They actually have been citing a situation where a worker had a heart attack and wasn't covered under any paid sick leave during that. But if you really dive into it, the reason why this is such a big deal right now is because we're just leaving the pandemic. So everyone was getting sick. It was spreading around. People weren't experiencing a good paid sick leave policy. That word of mouth has kind of driven the union to say, hey, this is what we just dealt with. We need to deal with this right now. So it is a lot to cover when you think about this, but let's kind of talk a little bit more about the BMWED. So of the 12 unions, the BMWED is actually the third largest. So it is significant that they are voting against this. President Biden actually got personally involved in the discussions and has officially, stated, it's actually been officially stated by the union that they're going to come to a different agreement on paid sick leave. And as a direct quotation from the union, they essentially said, if you provide us with the standard 56 hours of paid sick leave time off that is afforded by all federal government contractors, we'll end this dispute. Now, this most recent ask of 56 hours of paid sick leave is actually a lot less than the original ask. The original ask was for 15 days paid sick leave. So as you can imagine, this is, it's 2 days beyond a regular 5-day, 8-hour work week. Now, the original 15 days paid time off, the American Railroad Association, they came up with this number and said, hey, that's going to cost us annually $688 million. Now, kind of put a pin in that. Let's kind of talk about where we are in this whole negotiation process, because it's important to note that we have two of the largest unions still voting to ratify this agreement. And if one of them decides not to ratify, we are likely going to see these paid sick time requests come through. It's just, the third one not ratifying. And if the first or the second doesn't ratify, it's just going to be too much pressure to push that through on the agreement. Now, the really interesting situation is if these two other groups did vote to ratify, leaving that third group, the third largest group of the 12, they're not quite by themselves. They've got another group with them that's substantially smaller than theirs, but they're kind of isolated at that point. So that would be something we'd really have to keep an eye on. And I'm not sure in that situation if it would cause the negotiations to flare or sizzle. You can kind of see it going both ways. But again, keep your eyes on that. So, and also actually thinking about how this is going, all the votes are going to be tallied on November 21st. So it's really tune into the news right around Thanksgiving, because that's going to be where you see, is this going to flare or sizzle? So, couple final notes here. We mentioned the $688 million as far as what the American Railroad Association has mentioned their costs would be providing the 15-day sick leave that the unions first requested. The American Railroad Association also came out with another figure, and they said, if you do strike, you will cost the U.S. economy $2 billion a day in economic output. You really have to dive into that number to see what they're counting and how that adds up, but still, it's a lot of posturing going on. That's where we're at right now with it. We are right in the midst. There was just a 5-day cool-off period that got completed. November 19th was essentially, it is the day that this union said there would be a status quo until. So there is the chance November 19th we have a strike. That being said, the Biden administration has been getting heavily involved. I don't see that happening. If you look at the history of rail strikes in this country, they're taken very seriously by government. So we likely will see and continue to see more just government intervention. November 19th is a day to look out for, but it's really the 21st, because that's when all of the unions will have put in their votes. So that's the food for thought right now. That's exactly what's going on, what you got to think about. The two-prong issue, obviously, is diesel and locomotives, because most locomotives today require diesel to crank that alternator to power the electric motors. So it still is a required piece, and it would take time to switch. Anthony, I think you're muted.
Sorry, guys. I just said that was amazing. Way to drop the knowledge. So, folks, let's just hope that, all of this stuff sorts itself out, that there's no rail strike, and hopefully we won't run out of diesel, but it's something we thought was really important. We needed to bring to everyone's attention, because here's the thing: with this shortage of diesel, you can expect pricing to go up. Fuel surcharges, bunkers, every pricing is going to go up. Although ocean freight rates are dropping, all of the fuel is just going to start to spike now, and you're going to see increases. And although on the diesel side, like there's biodiesel fuel, and there's another, I was looking at it yesterday, there's another sort of diesel fuel that's, it's a derivative of some sort of vegetable. I can't think of it off the top of my head now. I'm having a senior moment, folks, but I don't think there's really any way around it. So
yeah,
we just have to take it day by day. But we'll hand it back to Vanessa to see if we have any questions.
Hey everyone, it seems like, no, I didn't miss anything. It seems like we don't have any questions for today. So if you do have any questions, the follow-up email is coming up tomorrow morning, and you can, someone wants to ask a question.
Cool.
Oh, okay. Diana, would you please write your question in either the Q&A box or the chat box? Let's see if she can.
So while Diana's writing her question, if you were with us last week, we talked a little bit about what's going on with natural gas and production down in the South, and how we have so much, we don't have capacity in our pipes right now. And literally producers are paying companies to take the natural gas off their hands. And so, I think when running through all of this, it's one of those situations where, wrong fuel at the wrong time, right? If we had the ability to do these conversions, it would be just obviously fantastic right now. But natural gas has its own, obviously its own issues, particularly with the production. So
let's see here. I don't see her question. Oh, yep, it's coming. Would you have some document letter with this information for me to share with the supply team here in the company? Yes. So what I do, we always create like a short document that we send on the follow-up that is written, as well as the link to the webinar. So yes, you will be receiving that tomorrow morning, because I always leave, Thursday afternoon to work on said document. But yes, you will receive that, Diana. Nice, thanks. That's what she said. Awesome. Okay.
A lot of info today, people. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
A fun time.
Bye.
Take care now. Stay tuned for FMR next week. Take care.